Hello, my name is Lindsay. I am coming on here just to kind of talk through my daughter's experience with infant botulism and just our whole experience with the whole situation. I know when she was first diagnosed, or they first even speculated that she had botulism, the first thing you do is pull out your phone and you're Googling and researching things. And I know one of the first things I did was go on YouTube to see if I could find any informational videos on it. And there's information here and there, but there was really nobody talking through their experience with botulism because it's such a rare diagnosis. So I kind of just wanted to make a video of our experience. I'm not technologically savvy at all. I've never made a YouTube video before in my life, so I'm sorry if this is not the best quality video. I have no clue how to edit anything. This is just gonna be a straight through video of me talking. If I had more time, I would maybe figure it out, but I really just felt compelled to kind of post this online because I feel like there's a lot of families going through this experience right now with the increase in cases right now with the baby formula situation. And so I just kind of want to get this video online so people can watch it and kind of have more information moving forward. Even those that whose children don't have botulism, but maybe they're not sure exactly what symptoms to look for. So this all started for us almost a year ago. It'll be a year in December, when our daughter was 4 months old. So I'll kind of do a play-by-play of the situation, the initial symptoms that she had. I have some stuff written down. I'm very much like a note taker, so I've wrote out a lot of information while we were going through it. So if I'm looking down, that's just kind of what I'm looking at to make sure I'm mentioning everything. But so she had just turned 4 months old on December 14th. She had her 4-month well baby visit it was a Wednesday. So on this Wednesday, she had her 4-month well baby visit, and she had just turned 4 months. This was on December 18th. Okay, so it was a Wednesday. I just remember the play-by-play of the weekdays. So if that's what I say, I'm sorry. But on the Wednesday, she had her visit. She had her routine 4-month shots. The only concern I had that I mentioned to the pediatrician, not concerned, but she was starting to get her first tooth. So she was maybe a little bit irritable from that. Otherwise, the visit went completely normal. She got her 4-month vaccines. Everything was good. The next day, Thursday, she was a little fussy and she had a little bit of a fever, but nothing else concerning. I primarily nursed her except for when I was working and stuff, and she'd have to take bottles, but and all of that was going fine throughout the day, but she was just fussy, which I chalked up to having a fever and just getting a vaccine. So so that evening, it was a Thursday evening, she when I was doing her last feeding of the night, she just did not want to latch for some reason. That has never happened before. She was a perfectly good nursing baby, no issues there. But she didn't want to latch, and so we gave her a bottle, and she still even didn't really want to take the bottle, which we chalked up to her just being fussy. I think we gave her some Tylenol or something, but she had only taken 2 ounces, and her typical bottles were 4 to 5 ounces. So that was kind of unusual for her, but once again, just figured she's getting a tooth. She just had vaccines. That's that. And then the next morning, Friday morning, was just a bad morning. She would not latch on to nurse at all. So I was trying to give her a bottle. She would not drink the bottle. The issue, it seemed like she almost forgot how to suck was how I was describing it. She looked like she was hungry. She was coming to me. She was coming to the bottle, but just wasn't sucking the milk out essentially. And this was going on throughout the day. I was trying, I felt all day to get her to drink milk, and nothing was working. I called the pediatrician's office that afternoon, and I was a little bit frustrated because the nurse, when I was explaining what was going on with Libby, the nurse was I was saying how it was almost she forgot how to suck. It's not she didn't seem hungry, it's she forgot how to suck. And the nurse on the nurse line was is this your first child? Have you had a child before? like, yeah, I have a 2-year-old. Like, I've fed babies before. Like, I know how to feed a baby. It really just seems like she's like not remembering how to like suck the bottle, basically. And she's like, well, you know, if the symptoms persist and she's still not eating, call us tomorrow morning and you can get an appointment Saturday morning. They had like a few appointments available on Saturday mornings. So that entire day, she only ate 7 ounces, which was very unusual for her. She typically ate between like 21 to 24 ounces in a day. She was already like less volume intake of a baby than my first baby. So I was already like kind of hyper aware of like making sure she got enough milk in, because she didn't take in as much milk as my other daughter. So, okay. So, and she at 4 months was like a sleep through the night baby. So we let her sleep. My husband woke her up actually at like 5 a.m. to try and feed her a bottle, because I was just still so concerned. Like, she only had 7 ounces all day on Friday. Woke her up Saturday morning to kind of like assess how she was and that kind of thing. I also, FYI, am an Owlet sock. More so because I just like having the data. Background, just I'm in the medical field. I'm a nurse practitioner. My husband is a CRNA, or a nurse anesthetist. So we have medical knowledge. So anyway, I like the Owlet sock for the data purposes of it. And so overnight though, her Owlet was like fine. Like, her heart rate was her baseline low 100s when she's sleeping. Oxygen was like 99%. Everything was perfect on her Owlet. But still wanted to wake her up and try and get her to eat. So my husband got up at like 5 a.m., tried to give her a bottle. She wouldn't really take the bottle at all. Like, no. And she was just almost like, I don't want to say lethargic, but like just not as like, I don't know, just not moving around quite as much as normal. Like, seemed kind of like a little out of it, drowsy almost, but not. Kind of hard to explain, just where you know that the baby's off. You know something's wrong, even though vitals, everything seemed normal, but she just wasn't eating. Okay, so called the pediatrician's office right when they opened, and I was like, she's still not acting normal. I think something's wrong. Like, got her in. I think the appointment was like at 9:30 or something. So sorry, I'm gonna look at my notes now to make sure I'm not missing anything. So then, yep, he tried to feed her. She wouldn't take any of the bottle. She had like, she almost had this like moaning cry. It wasn't like a full out cry like her normal, which was weird. And she seemed a little lethargic, I had written. Got an appointment. So at the appointment, he felt like there was no red flags. He felt like she was a little lethargic because she wasn't eating or drinking as much as she normally did. But her heart rate, her vitals, everything was perfectly stable. She like didn't even have a fever anymore, which all of that I attribute to the vaccine that she had gotten on Wednesday. But no fever. Everything was like totally normal except for her like demeanor, sort of, and like, which we figured was from like dehydration essentially at this point. But he was not overly concerned about dehydration yet. The pediatrician said, just try to, let me see, basically, try to give her like equal ratios of like Pedialyte to milk all day, because sometimes they're more likely to take Pedialyte because of the taste or whatever. So we got Pedialyte. We were actually traveling 2 hours away that day for my husband's family Christmas, because this is like a few days before Christmas, and we were like, should we travel with her? We just didn't know what to do, because she, from a sickness perspective, had no signs of sickness at all. Like, her heart rate was normal. She had no fever. It was just, she was like acting weird and not wanting to eat, but she did not seem like a sick baby, I guess is the word. So we traveled to his hometown for their Christmas. I was just basically stressed out the whole time because she was not being a normal baby. She just didn't look good in my eyes. So that evening while we were there, I was just kind of getting more and more stressed out about the whole thing. I even brought the Owlet sock to my husband's hometown, which I never travel with the Owlet sock. I'm not like that concerned about it. Hang on, I have to pause. Okay, sorry. My mom is shopping for me at Costco and wanted to make sure she was getting the right thing. Hopefully I could merge these videos together somehow. But anyway, I don't typically travel with the Owlet sock, but I was just so like stressed out about the whole situation that I took it with us. And that, like, Saturday night into Sunday, once again, her heart rate was perfect. Oxygen was literally perfect. But when she woke up in the morning, she couldn't even like fully cry. She had this like moaning. She was just like moaning basically. That was when I started using the term like floppy. Like her neck control was not where it normally was by any means. She at 4 months old was already like rolling onto her belly to sleep, and can roll back and forth without a problem, and had pretty much full neck support. And she did not roll over at night to sleep that night, and her neck did not seem as strong as it normally was. So super early in the morning, we decided to leave his hometown and drive back to we live near a very big city with a very big, good, like, children's hospital. So we were heading back, and we were trying to decide if we wanted to make a pediatrician appointment or what we needed to do. And I was just like, I think we need to go to the emergency room. And like, as soon as I said that, I became stressed out because I'm like, this is now like a situation. Like, I've never taken my other child, we've never had to go to the emergency room for a kid before. So this was like now a stressful, even more stressful situation because it was like becoming like serious. So, and that whole Saturday, I forgot to mention, did I write down how much she took in the whole day? In total, had about 2 ounces of milk and 2 ounces of Pedialyte the entire day on that Saturday. So, yes. So just to put it into perspective, all day Friday and all day Saturday, she had like 11 ounces in total into her system. So this kind of escalated pretty quickly because she was previously fine before all this. So now Sunday, we go to the emergency room. Now, even with my husband and I being in the medical field, we like really had no idea what was going on with her. Botulism was not even a thought in our heads at all. We didn't know what was wrong with her, but we really thought her symptoms, like her floppiness, was from being dehydrated. The fact that she was like not drinking anything for some reason. We didn't know why, but we felt like her symptoms were because she was dehydrated and she just needed fluids. So we went to the emergency room at the children's hospital, and they like got us back right away. She just at this point looked ill. She was actually looking ill. Like, her eyes were like only half open. They were almost like red rimmed, just like didn't look good sitting in her car seat when we brought her in. So they got her back pretty quickly, and did like her glucose, her vitals. Once again, vitals, blood, heart rate and oxygen, all that were perfect. Her glucose was 60, which I don't even know for sure what a normal is for a baby, but they weren't like overly concerned about that. So then they took us into this other room where we started seeing physicians. So a resident, I think, came in, and we kind of explained the situation again. And then very quickly after that resident came in, a fellow came in who is like one step below an attending. Attending is like a head doctor. So fellow is just one step below an attending. They're pretty much like, they are fully trained. They're just getting specialized in their specialty basically. So they're a fully trained physician. So she came in, and at this point still Libby had no like IV in her. She was not getting fluids. This is what my husband and I were just like stressed about. We're like, we've been in here for like 30 minutes and no one's even put an IV in her, given her fluids. Like, she just needs fluids and she'll perk up. Like, that was our mindset. Even though we're in the medical field, we just were like, she needs fluids, she needs nutrition, and she'll perk up. So the fellow came in, and we explained the whole situation again. She did an assessment on Libby, which at this point was becoming scary to watch an assessment because they'd, try to pick her up off the table or do whatever. And like, her head, it's called a head lag. So she just has zero control of her neck muscles at this point, and like floppy, like arms were kind of just like flopped. And the scariest part, this was probably one of the most nerve-wracking parts, was when that fellow, she's like standing at the computer after she did her assessment, and then just like stands there and like has her arms crossed, and like, when someone's visibly shaken up, like voice is shaky, they seem very like just anxious. She was just standing there, and previously she did not have that demeanor. Previously she had a very professional demeanor. She just kind of was standing there like saying how concerned she was about Libby, basically. Like, I don't even remember the words that were coming out of her mouth. I just remember the demeanor of just anxious. And she walked out, and my husband and I were like, what is going on? Like, she seemed very concerned. She just basically said, like, I need to go talk to our other doctor. Like, I'll be back. And, like, seemed so anxious. And at that point, I was like, we were extremely anxious at that point because we work with doctors all the time. They don't usually show their anxieties or their stressors to their patients or their families. So we were very scared at that point. Within a minute or so, the nurse came in and was like, all right, we're just going to head down the hall to this other room. And we're like, okay. So we get Libby, we head down. Turns out it's the like ICU pod. And there's like 10 people, I swear it felt like, waiting for her in that room. We just like lay her on the bed in there, and people just come at her from all angles, which, you know, my husband and I should be used to that, but it's still like when it's your own family, it's a whole different situation. So they just kind of went over top of her. We're hooking her up to the heart monitor, working on getting an IV in her. And my husband and I are just sitting there like, I'll never forget this. My husband looked at me, and he's like a very hard person to shake up or get anxious or, you know, nervous about anything. And he just looked at me and said, if they're trying to scare the crap out of us, they're doing a really good job at it. And I'm like, yep, they sure are. Like, just, it was just very nerve-wracking, especially when it's your baby. So at that point, as they were, you know, doing that, the attending physician came up to us, who I don't remember if she had come in to see us previously when we were in the other room, but I don't think she did, because I remember she introduced herself and she came up to us and she was like, I know this is kind of overwhelming. I just want to let you know what our thoughts are. We feel like she might have infant botulism. And my husband and I are like, okay, we've heard about this. We've learned about it in nursing school. Could not tell you the symptoms, the signs, the trajectory, the outcomes. Like, it's just such an uncommon situation that you really don't, all you think about is honey. Like, oh, don't give your infant honey under 12 months old. Like, they could get botulism. You don't really think about what it is, what it looks like. So we're like, okay. And they're like, yeah. So we're going to run a bunch of tests. You know, it's more of a diagnosis of exclusion. So, which means you kind of have to eliminate everything else before you can officially diagnose that. And even so, the test for infant botulism is a stool sample. So first of all, that means the baby has to poop before you can even test for it. And then the stool sample has to get sent out to, I don't even know where, a lab. I don't even know if there's a lab in our state or if it had to go, we're in Ohio. So if it had to go somewhere in our state or if it had to go somewhere else, I don't even remember the specifics of that, but it takes a while for the test result to actually come back. So, so she said, you know, we probably won't even have the test result by the time you're discharged. But, you know, it's kind of a diagnosis of exclusion. And she said, she kind of explained to us what it looks like, how because of Libby's symptoms of like being floppy, losing muscle tone, it's called hypotonic. Basically, she's very hypotonic. It's kind of like a classic botulism symptoms and onset and type of thing. And she said, so, you know, you'll probably be in the hospital here for a couple weeks. And at that point, we're like, holy cow, like, what is this situation? Like, I just remember, like, shaking. Like, I couldn't even hold myself back. Like, just, like, yeah. It was just hearing that is just a very stressful thing to hear about your baby. So, and she was explaining all the testing that they needed to do, like, just basically every single lab work, every single respiratory viral panel, cultures, a lumbar puncture they had to get our consent for, which is basically where they stick a needle in the baby's spine to test that fluid for any infection or anything like that. Yeah, let me just make sure I'm not missing anything here. Went to the critical care pod of the ER, lumbar puncture. Oh, they did a head CT and an abdominal ultrasound. The head CT was just obviously to rule out any brain issues, and then the abdominal CT was for to rule out intussusception, it's called. It's kind of when like part of your intestine goes into the other part of your intestine. I can't remember why they were concerned for that, but I don't know, maybe because she wasn't eating or something like that. I don't know. So after a lot of that testing was done, we were transferred up to the PICU, which is the pediatric ICU. And yeah, so that night was probably the worst night. That was Sunday night into Monday. So they had done like all of the testing. She was on the monitor up in the ICU and like I felt like weaker by the minute basically. So she was kind of like losing all strength in her extremities basically. Was at this point not crying at all, could not cry. She was like doing a moan every so often, but couldn't even cry. Eyes were getting droopier and droopier. But it was hard because everything looked normal. You know, she's just laying in bed, not really moving, not crying. Monitor looks perfect. Numbers are perfect. You know, we're otherwise a quiet room that seems like the baby's fine, right? So, but one of the pediatric ICU doctors requested that they put a nasal cannula on her, which is just where oxygen goes through into your nose. Her oxygen numbers were fine, but it was to monitor what's called end-tidal CO2. So basically it's just another number on the monitor that they can look at to assess if she's beginning to like retain CO2, which would imply that she's not exchanging air well enough or essentially breathing well enough. So, and at this point, because she wasn't crying, she wasn't really like coughing or anything like that either, speaking of, which is not a good thing. It means you like can't really clear your airway or your secretions or things like that. So, but anyway, because everything kind of seemed quiet that evening, I told my husband, like, just go home. I'll stay with her tonight. Come back like first thing in the morning. But we needed stuff. Like we had basically nothing with us. We weren't prepared to even stay in the hospital necessarily overnight. So, and we lived about 35 minutes from the hospital. So, so he went home that evening and I stayed with her. And yeah, that night was just awful. She completely lost her cough and her gag reflex, which if you are in the medical field, even if you're not, it's a big deal if you can no longer cough. So that it basically means that they're sticking like a plastic flimsy tube down your throat that's connected to suction on the wall, and it's to suck out like gunk or secretions or anything like that. And typically when someone gets a tube shoved down their throat, especially that's connected to suction, you're gonna start to cough or gag on it, right? She completely lost that reflex. So they would put that down her throat to get out any boogers, anything, pull it out. She was not physically responding at all. Not coughing, not gagging. And that it was very difficult to stimulate a cough and gag in the beginning of the night, and it just gradually faded away over the night. So at 6 a.m., I'll never forget it was 6 a.m. because the ICU doctor, his alarm clock went off at 6 a.m. because they probably had to wake him up from the on-call room if he wasn't already awake. But they had called him to the bedside, so it was shortly before 6 a.m. They called him to the bedside, the nurse did, for fear of needing to intubate Libby, which was like my biggest fear overnight. And you kind of think that might be coming, but you're just praying that it doesn't. And her end-tidal CO2, which was the number that they trend to make sure she is not retaining too much CO2 basically, that number was pretty stable. You use it as like a trend. You don't really necessarily look at the number itself. You just make sure it's not increasing. Hers was pretty stable throughout the night. So I wasn't overly concerned that she would need to get intubated, but I should have known like losing her cough and gag that she might need to. So the ICU doctor came in, assessed her, suctioned her, all of that. And at the same time, I'm texting my husband, like, please, can you come in as soon as possible? They're thinking about intubating her. He's a nurse anesthetist. All he does for work is intubate people. So that's like his job, the respiratory system, airway, breathing, all of that. That's like his thing. And I'm like, please do not intubate her unless my husband is here. Like I just wanted him to be there. So, but, yeah, so the doctor was basically like, yeah, I mean, this is a difficult situation because she's still maintaining her oxygen, her end-tidal CO2 looks fine, but this is a very risky situation because she cannot cough, she cannot gag, she cannot clear her airway. The nurses are the sole people basically keeping her breathing because they're suctioning her out. Libby had not lost her like diaphragm strength essentially, so she was still able to breathe on her own. So I was like, I basically requested that they don't intubate her yet because I wanted my husband there, one, and two, she was like otherwise stable. And of course I didn't want it to come down to an emergent situation, but I was just trying to advocate because after reading online, probably like all night reading and researching botulism online, babies who end up on the ventilator, like as with anyone, have a more prolonged hospitalization and just more complications can arise. So like the goal was basically to keep her from getting intubated. And so just trying to advocate for her that morning. But I remember it was 6 a.m. because as the doctor was standing there talking to me, his alarm clock went off and I'm like, oh my gosh, it was just a bad night. So, oh my goodness. And I skipped a whole ginormous chunk of the story. Sunday night, when they told us that they thought it was botulism and we were inquiring about like treatment and things like that, they said that the only treatment, I'm sorry, this is a big part of the story, the only treatment is this medication called Baby Big, which is an immunoglobulin, like the antitoxin. But because botulism is so rare, it had to come from California. And they're like, the typical transit time is like 12 to 24 hours. So that was also a huge stressor Sunday night into Monday, just like you're waiting for this medication to get there. And it's such a serious situation that a doctor from the Children's Hospital had to call the California Department of Health or some doctor in California, talk to them, tell them the symptoms that Libby was having. They had to basically approve. This is all hearsay of what people told us the process was, but they basically have to like, the doctor in California has to say like, yes, those are symptoms of botulism. Yes, we will send the Baby Big. That's what the medication's called. So it not only had to get approved, but then it had to get shipped. And then I don't even know the exact way how it got to us, but it sounds like it flew from California to North Carolina, and then somebody had to drive it from North Carolina to our city. So yes, basically, so that Monday morning, she's just, getting weaker and weaker. And we're just waiting for the medication to arrive because basically with botulism, the babies have progressive paralysis, which is why she was getting hypotonic and unable to move. She was essentially getting paralyzed. And the medication, what it does is it just halts the paralysis. So it does not reverse it. The only way that a baby starts to move again is because their body relearns how to move. It's not that the medication fixes the problem. It just stops the toxin from continuing to affect the nerves, neurons, whatever it affects. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly. But so really we just needed the medication to get there as soon as possible so that the progression of the paralysis can stop before it got any worse. So can I make sure I'm not missing anything? I'm sorry, this is getting long. And Baby Big, so that Monday, Libby was not moving at all. Baby Big arrived. It was given around 9:30 a.m., which was like a miracle because it was like nearly a 12-hour time from like calling them to actually administering it, which is a great time frame. We were so thankful that it came so early. But that was a stressful situation. You're just waiting for this medication as your baby's getting worse and worse. So very stressful. And then towards the evening, she was having issues with her blood pressure. So they had to give her some IV medication for that called IV hydralazine. Not sure why she was having issues with her blood pressure. We don't really know. It's not really a common side effect of the immunoglobulin or the Baby Big medication. But yeah, so anyway, that evening they also placed an NG tube for her to start getting nutrition. Finally, that was like our big thing. We just wanted her to have nutrition. So let's see. So anyway, it's really hard to say because the progression is slow, even though it feels quick. But in terms of the progression of the paralysis, like a big question we get is like, as soon as she got the medication, did she start to like get better? She did not start to get better. The real question is like, did the progression of the paralysis halt? And I would say, it was just happening so slowly at that point, and like she wasn't moving at all at that point. So it's hard to say if the paralysis progression stopped immediately or if it took a few hours. They said it may take a few hours. But regardless, she did not need to get intubated. Her end tidal CO2 remained stable. Her oxygen levels remained stable. And she did not need to get intubated. And the nurses there were just amazing. They were like on top of the suctioning of her, ensuring that she was clearing her airway and was able to breathe safely. I'm sure it didn't help that me and my husband were like at the bedside 24/7. Like we were like, we will suction her if we need to. Like we were both ICU nurses. If you guys can't come in, like we are more than happy to take care of that. Like we want to make sure our baby is safe, but the ICU nurses are so amazing that we never had to like do any of that stuff. They did it all and they were amazing. So let's see. And this is all, so the next day was Christmas Eve. Yeah. Next day was Christmas Eve. They started tube feeds on her. This part of the story I'll kind of just skim through a little quicker. But yeah, they started tube feeds on her through her NG tube, which is just a tube that goes from your nose down into your stomach. And they gradually increased the volume of the tube feeds. They were actually giving her breast milk. I was pumping, so they were able to give her breast milk that they were fortifying with formula just because she needed more calories, essentially. And she was still having issues with her blood pressure that day. They were still giving IV hydralazine every so often to bring her blood pressures down. But that day also, we had noticed her heart rate was starting to get higher. And then her tube feeds were at goal. Well, this was probably the only issue we had, honestly, during the whole hospitalization was the feeding, the situation with the feeding. So they, they have like nutrition on board. They have, all sorts of people that are figuring out what your baby needs. Well, she typically, like I had said earlier, drank like 21 to 24 ounces of breast milk a day. And that was where she was satisfied. She had plenty of wet and dirty diapers normally, like that was her number. All babies are different, but she drank like 21 to 24 ounces of breast milk. Well, when they got her up to her goal volume of tube feeds of the breast milk, which was also fortified with formula, it came out to 43 mLs an hour, which if you calculate that out, which it took my husband and I, unfortunately, because we didn't think we'd have to do this for the team, but like calculated it out, that comes out to about 34 ounces of breast milk, and that's fortified breast milk. So that's essentially over 10 ounces more milk per day that she is taking than she normally would. And fortified. So she's getting like definitely way more calories than she normally does, definitely way more volume than she normally does. And one concern with botulism makes everything hypotonic, including your gut. So one of the most common symptoms of botulism is constipation. So we had to talk to the doctors about that on rounds the following morning. I think it was Christmas morning or it might have even been the evening before. Anyway, we brought up our concerns and they were able to bring down the rate of her tube feeds. And they still they didn't even really want to. They felt like based on her, I don't know, age, height, baseline, like ideal body weight, she should have been getting 34 ounces. But it was one of those situations where you're just like, I feel like I know what's best for my kid. I don't care if the formula calculates that she needs 34 ounces. We advocated and we were like, no, that is too much. Please bring the rate down. Like, I think that, and you know what? After they brought the rate down on her tube, they actually paused them for a while. Thank goodness for, I want to say like 2 hours or so. Restarted them at a safer, what I felt like was safer volume, and her heart rate came down and her blood pressure was better. So part of me feels like, I don't want to say they were overfeeding her, but I think she was just getting a little more than she needed, and for not really eating that much volume since the Thursday prior. So whatever that is, 5 days. I think it was just a little too much for her. 4-month baby. I think it was just a little too much for her at once. Let's see. And I think that might have been the day they finally got a stool sample that they were able to send to wherever they send the stool sample to find out if it's botulism. Yeah, so basically in the subsequent days, she started to attempt to move her upper arms. She started to move her upper arms more. She's a thumb sucker, so I swear that was like her motivation for being able to move her arms and get strength back in her arms, was like trying to get her thumb into her mouth. But they're concerned by that Friday, she still wasn't really moving her legs, so they wanted to get an MRI on her, because at this point, like, they don't know that it's botulism. They are throwing out all these other differential diagnoses that are very scary. So, but they were thinking of getting an MRI of her because she wasn't moving her legs much. Well, the nurse came in and we're like, can you just like really rile her up? Like suction her really good, like just see if you can get her riled up. And that nurse got her riled up enough, and she was moving her legs. She showed that she can move her legs, so we requested that they not do the MRI on her. This was also just a decision that we made as a mom and dad who are in the medical field and trying to advocate for their kid, because they felt like if they did an MRI, they were gonna have to intubate her for it. And we just spent how many days trying to avoid intubation and avoid any chance that we'd have a prolonged hospitalization, even though we were going to anyway. So we requested no MRI, and she started to move her legs more in the subsequent days, and everything was fine. So she did not get an MRI. Let me see. Okay. They eventually switched her. Sorry, this whole thing from here on out is just kind of her beginning to regain strength. And you know what? I left out something huge. Physical therapy and occupational therapy were the best. They were I swear, I don't want to say the most important people at the hospital, but they were like who I was waiting around for all day to see, because at this point, if it is botulism, which we were like 99% certain it was, and the baby big was given, like at this point, she just needs to regain strength. And the only way you could do that really is like physical therapy and occupational therapy, helping her and also teaching us what we can do for her to like kind of regain strength. It's a whole new world when it's like a baby that you're trying to like reteach how to sit up or hold their head up properly, or like what's the safest way to do things. You know, we can do like range of motion with her arms and legs in the bed all day, but like actually strength exercises and things like that, we didn't know what we should be doing. So physical therapy and occupational therapy were the best, and never wanted to like miss them coming into the room. So they were amazing, I just have to say. And yes, occupational therapy was really who worked on like her suck and stuff like that, getting that back. We did like tummy time, worked with OT, and was cleared to start taking some breast milk. This was like a week and a half later, and we were still in the hospital, but she was able to start trying to take some milk from a bottle before. So they had switched her to bolus feeds, which is basically like, I think every 3 hours they were giving her however much, like 130 mLs of breast milk to simulate like feeds basically, instead of just continuous feeding, because your body doesn't normally in the real world continuously receive nutrients. So they switched her over to bolus, and then was able to start to try feeds through a bottle, see how she was doing. And then the day before we left, we were in the hospital for 2 weeks. The day before we left, she had a video swallow study, and she failed thin liquids, which means that she was aspirating some thin liquids, which means instead of going down her esophagus and into her stomach, it was going like into her trachea and basically potentially into her lungs, which is like dangerous. So she failed that, had to go home with the NG tube, and was able to take thick liquids. So there's different stages of thick liquids, and it kind of sounds, it doesn't make sense. Like if you're not in a occupational therapy role or the medical field, most people think that like the thicker liquids would be more difficult to swallow, but they're actually easier to swallow. Thin liquids are the most difficult to swallow. So, and breast milk or regular formula is a thin liquid. Anything that you and I pretty much drink is a thin liquid. And there's thickener that can be used to thicken things to a certain degree. And this is all just very complicated, but basically we had to thicken her feeds. If she was going to take anything through the bottle, it had to be thicker than just normal breast milk or normal formula, so that she would not aspirate it. So that's a whole story in and of itself, of the fact that you can't really like thicken breast milk, because breast milk has these enzymes in it that break down the thickener too quickly, and so the liquid is not as thick as it needs to be. So yeah, that's a whole story. But and it was a very big frustration because I just wanted her to have breast milk, and in the hospital she could not have breast milk because it could not properly and safely be thickened, because there's literally no thickener that can thicken breast milk. So if someone can hop on that train and find some type of thickener that does not get broken down by breast milk enzymes, that would be amazing, because I literally in the hospital could not believe that they did not have some type of thickener that would work for her. So yeah, so we were discharged 2 weeks later, and that was like the most stressful. So we're into the month of January at this point, and yeah, January was like pretty much the most stressful month ever, because we brought a baby home from the hospital with an NG tube and tube feeds, and all these directions on how much she needs to eat, how much the feeds need to be thickened. And it was an around the clock job. I remember, I swear the first week, aside from doctor appointments for her, which she had a lot, I did not get out of my pajamas every day, because it's like nonstop, like, and especially if you're breastfeeding, because you then have to pump instead. So it was just this vicious cycle, not vicious, but just this cycle of like, I was just living life in like whatever it was, 2 or 3 hour increments of feedings between, because you were allowed to attempt a bottle with thickened feed in it. So, and you had 30 minutes to give a bottle. The baby could not take longer than 30 minutes to take a bottle, or else it was expelling too much energy. And Libby could not drink a whole bottle in 30 minutes. She could barely drink an ounce or two at first in 30 minutes. So you're spending 30 minutes, so you're thickening the formula or the breast milk, whatever. Getting the feed ready. 30 minutes trying to feed the bottle to her. Then whatever she doesn't drink has to go through an NG, the NG tube into her stomach. So you have to program the NG tube that you got sent home with, or program the tube feed, whatever the word is. The machine that feeds the tube feeds the feed into her feeding tube. And she has to sit upright and get that for however long it takes. I can't even remember how long that takes to go into her. And then in the meantime, I have to pump to get ready for her next feeding, and just, or like to freeze the milk, whatever. And then you just feel like you're starting the cycle over again. And in between that, you're trying to, like, I also have a 2-year-old trying to take care of. It felt like a full-time job. It felt like as soon as I was done with one feeding, and then you have to rinse out the tubing from the tube feed, because you have to reuse it, because there's not enough, you can't use like new tubing every single time. So we had a nail that we hung into the wood above our sink, and you had to like rinse through the whole tube and run it on a cycle. And by the time you had all of that done and pumped and sat on your butt for 1 second, you're studying the whole thing over again with, oh, Libby's awake. She wants time to make a bottle and try and give her a bottle for 30 minutes. I mean, it was exhausting. But eventually, I can't remember exactly how long. This is kind of where my notes trickle away, because life was just even more of a blur after we left the hospital. I don't know if it was a week or 2 weeks. No, I think it was probably at least 2 weeks after, or 3. I don't know. She pulled her NG tube out on her own. And we had tubes to replace it with, and we've put NG tubes in plenty of people. Like, we would have been able to, but at that point, she was like 10 mLs away from being at her goal intake through a bottle. Like, we were giving barely anything through the NG anymore. So we're like, you know what? That's her sign. We're leaving the tube out. So yeah. So just to sum up the last bits of the story, and if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me. I don't want to make this any longer. It's already like over a half hour. Holy cow. But basically, we had follow-ups with physical therapy, occupational therapy, feeding, speech, neurology, her normal pediatrician. She saw tons of appointments in those for the first month for sure, trickling into the second month. And, you know, it could have even been more prolonged if she had a longer hospitalization and was more acutely ill. But, you know, we narrowly missed like getting intubated and all that stuff. So I feel like she overall had a pretty good hospital course and situation afterwards. But Yeah, I think we went to a total of maybe 4 physical therapy visits. Beyond that, you kind of figure out what you can do for her, and it's just a matter of her like regaining strength. The feeding visits were the most stressful. I'm sorry, I did not like those appointments at all. They just never went well. They were stressful for me. They were stressful for Libby. She had trouble eating a bottle with any form of distraction at all. You literally had to be basically in a dark room, TV off, lights off, everybody quiet for her to take a bottle successfully in the beginning. And so proving at these feeding appointments while the doctor's watching you, even if it was through a reverse mirror or whatever it's called, I don't care. Libby still could not take a bottle in an office. I don't think at any of those appointments she did. We tried a video visit once and it worked like a little bit better, but yeah, so basically about a month and a half later, she had a follow-up video swallow study, barium swallow study, whatever, and she passed it. So we were able to not thicken her feeds anymore. And at that point, she was able to take normal breast milk and everything was fine. And one question I've had asked a few times was I ever able to nurse her again? So by the time I was technically like allowed to actually nurse her again, because she was able to take thin liquids again, including thin breast milk, it was basically a month and a half to 2 months from the last time she had nursed. And I did try, and she did seem to remember how to, but in the month and a half or 2 months that it had been, she had gotten 2 more teeth. And so we did not nurse anymore. We just went to bottles, and I pumped for a year, and that was not fun, but neither is getting bit. So, yeah. So that's kind of the story. I just talked a long time, and that was a lot of information, but I am more than happy to answer any questions that anybody has. If you have questions or want me to go into more detail about anything, I certainly can, or any specific questions about follow-up or anything at all, please just reach out to me, and I hope this could be a good resource to you.